Hey everybody, Ricardo. We are here again, FarCry 5 preview event, hanging out. We have some fantastic folks from the team. If you want to go around and introduce yourselves, please do so.
Sure. I'm Dan Hay, and I'm the creative director on Far Cry 5.
Rick Allen Ross, technical consultant, cult expert.
Awesome. Tanya and I are here. We're going to talk a little bit about cults. We're also going to talk about just exactly how all this wonderful gameplay that we got a chance to mess around with a little while ago came to be, and also talk about why some of the stuff is in there that we didn't expect to see. So, you want to go first? You can
Sure.
just start it off.
All right. So for Dan, we love that the game really doesn't shy away from religious imagery specifically, as Christianity and Catholicism. So when you all decided to have religion play an important part of the story, what were concerns that came up?
I think we just wanted to make sure that whenever we build a world, and it's every facet of the world, that it feels credible and it feels real, and that it's something that, when you had reflexes of walking around the world, it felt like everything was the right size or that it made sense. But at the same time, we also know this is a game. It's fiction. We want to be able to make it so that we can own it. So that's why we chose to build Hope County, Montana. That's not a place you can go to in the real world. Mm-hmm. It's ours. It's filled with characters that are born off of different people that maybe we've met or whatever else. But the truth is that they're ours, and they're our characters. And then when you think about the actual cult itself, we made it our cult, right? Yeah. And it starts with the father, building a magnetic character, doing a lot of research, looking at what it would be to, I had to believe that this character would be able to captivate me.
Yeah.
That I would fall into this cult, and with a very short amount of time, I believe that this is something that could feel real. And I think that when we did our delve into cults and we looked into, what it is to build a cult and how you do it, it was immensely helpful to have expertise to be able to go in and start talking about, how does somebody get taken? How does somebody get their mind altered a little bit to be able to start to believe in it? And then how do we make sure that we do that and make it credible, but still make it ours and make it a piece of fiction?
Nice. One of the interesting parts about the setting, and something that everyone has kind of been talking about, is like, all right, so you're now in Middle America, right? Yep. When you went to go do research, did you feel like there are some things that you kind of figured out and found in some of that research that specifically added some really interesting tidbits to the way that you wanted to tell the story and kind of share it out with the rest of the community?
I think that when you think of an idea of what something is, like when you see the game first time and you get at first blush, you think, oh, the game's about this or it's like this. It was the same for us when we went to Montana. It's like we had a cliche idea of what it was. And what was really interesting to kind of inform the characters that we built is just how people talk. They're very honest, right? Yeah. And I think there was a little nuanced thing that happens in the game where you can walk up to somebody and you can talk to them and you can walk away.
Yeah.
And if you walk away, they're going to be a little insulted. And when you come back, they're going to be like, really? Really? Can I continue?
Yeah.
And it's a little thing, but it means a lot because they feel real.
Yeah.
And I think that from that all the way up to how the cult operates, to how people talk, and one other thing that I would say is, one of the things that bothers me sometimes in video games is when you go and you meet AI that's out in the world and they have every piece of information at their disposal. They know everything about the world. And you're like, really, guys? It's like an encyclopedia.
They kind of tell on themselves.
Yeah, and you're like, wait a minute. Let's build people that don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
They have information, they have disinformation, they have false information, they have no clue. It just feels real. And so when you think about the strata of a world and building characters like that, you got to, the devil's in the details.
Nice.
Yeah. So I want to ask, speaking of cults, I want to ask, cults can be very graphic, very explicit at times. When we see coverage, it's sensationalistic, etc. So how did you kind of decide on what would be things we see in the game, things that wouldn't be seen in the game for both of you? Because I've never met a cult expert before, so this is fascinating.
Sure. I think that it's a good question from the standpoint of, how far do you go, what do you do, and what are the moments? And for us, it was just about, we know we're a first-person game.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an opportunity to have you meet magnetic people in the game, and they step into your comfort zone. But at the same time, we know that some of our gameplay, we want you to have bombastic moments and crazy moments, but we also want to have intimate moments. So I think for us, we just tried to keep it real, and that's why we went with the family, right? There's some really interesting things we learned from Rick about the bureaucracy of cults and moment to moment, what was it like for them to operate on a Tuesday? How did they talk? And there was one thing in particular where I started to hear about the language they would use when they spoke to each other. They had their own language, and that's something that you talked about quite a bit.
Well, I think this is my first time ever in a video game consulting, and what I was just blown away by was the attention to detail and how nuanced and complex the character of Joseph Seed is. That magnetic personality, that ability to penetrate into the cracks in people's lives. I thought that was just fascinating. But what you see in Far Cry 5 is not only a composite in the cult leader, but a composite in the cult itself. So what we need to realize is that cults are not defined by belief, but rather by behavior, structure, dynamics. So what you see in the game is classic. You see the absolute authoritarian cult leader who is the defining element and driving force of the group. Whatever he says is right is right. Whatever he says is wrong is wrong. And what you see also is a process of breaking people down through either persuasion or through drugs to get control, to get undue influence over their lives. And then finally, what you see in a destructive cult, and you see it here in spades, is the danger. The imminent danger and the destruction that is done by the leader who sees anything as justifiable. The ends justify the means.
Okay.
So we have a couple more questions before we have to let you go. Dan, I wanted to ask you specifically, when you have a game this big, what's the hardest part about trying to both give folks freedom, but also trying to let them go down the path that you're trying to tell in a narrative sense, and also in a gameplay sense, where you want everyone to see all the tools and all the candy that you've kind of put into the game?
Yeah.
Good job,
I think that there's a lot of tricky parts to this, right? You want to build a world that's generous and that allows the player to kind of drink in the world the way they want and go where they want.
Sure.
You also want a story that doesn't force the player to have a prescription of each moment, that it's not, I think we know that there's a certain cadence to movies and there's a certain cadence to books. When we watch television, we're used to stories being unfolding in a way that we're used to. And I think that when you build a choose your own adventure and you allow and you encourage the players to go out there and author their own stories and go in any direction, it's terrifying as a dev because you don't know where they're going to be. Like, we don't know moment to moment if you're going to have 1 guns for hire, 2 guns for hire, a bear, a dog, you're playing in co-op, you're playing alone,
right,
where you went, who you went, and it's chaotic, but we think we do that well from the standpoint of leaning into, take the tone of grabbing Herc, going out with an RPG and blowing a bunch of stuff up, and then having an earnest moment with the cult leader. And I think that Far Cry has done that well in 3 and 4 and Primal, and I think in 5 people are really going to like the idea that we're not prescriptive.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and do something a certain way. As a player, you kind of get to be a dev.
Yeah.
And you get to author your own story the way you want. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I think people are really going to respond to it. Players are going to love it.
Cool. Tanya, you get the last question.
Oh, all the pressure.
All the pressure. All the pressure.
We talked with the lead writer before you all,
Yep.
and so I was wondering, in terms of like letting the player kind of make their own destiny and figure things out, were there games where you've seen it well, or things that you can talk about that won't spoil Far Cry 5, where you're like that's that key moment, and no matter what a player does, it's kind of an aha moment for them, no matter where they are in the story?
Yeah, I think that there's, I think that when you look at some other brands out there and you look at other stories that are being authored, there's some interesting things happening in stories right now. And I think that, when I watch television and I watch, ordinarily when you're a kid, you'd invest in a character. And in modern television now, it can happen where a character you invest in is just gone.
Right.
They're just disappeared. Right. And I think that it's interesting to know that the way we're telling stories is changing. Mm-hmm. And that games is even at the forefront of that. Being able to give you the opportunity to go anywhere you want, play the game anywhere you want. And I think that it's really interesting to watch players be able to assemble their own stories. And when we made Far Cry, that was the deal. Freedom, opportunity, surprise. The freedom to go in any direction that you want to, the opportunity to meet a character, to play with that character, to meet a person, to do whatever, and the surprise of the game and all the system were going to rub into each other and collide in this sort of wonderful anecdote factory. That's what we built.
Gents, thank you so much
Cool.
for building this amazing world, coming on with us to Spawn on Me, and letting me hit everybody in the head with shovels that I could possibly do.
Cool.
We hope to have you both on the show at some point. It would be
cool.
fantastic.
Great.
And Ricardo, we have a lot of fun stuff in store. Far Cry 5 has a lot of fun stuff in store. Definitely cop it when it comes out, and we'll see you in a little bit.